Hi, my name is Callista, and this is the story of how my daughter was slapped by my own sister at her engagement party. But what happened that night wasn't just a moment of rage, it was the match that lit the fire of everything I had kept buried for years. I've never told this story out loud. Not like this. But maybe it's time someone does. The room was dripping in gold, literally. My sister Vivienne had rented out the grand ballroom at the Highland Ridge Country Club, where crystal chandeliers sparkled like diamonds, and every corner reeked of money, roses, and old rivalries. People were dressed in pastel silks, air-kissing and champagne-sipping like this was some royal gala. And I stood there in my simple navy dress, with my daughter, Mia, clutching my hand. "Mom," she whispered, tugging at my sleeve. "Is it okay if I go grab something to drink?" I looked down at her, the way she was trying so hard to be polite in a room full of people who never remembered her birthday. "Of course, sweetie. Just be careful, okay?" She gave me a proud little nod and trotted off toward the refreshments table, where servers in white gloves handed out everything from sparkling cider to red berry mocktails. I didn't think twice. I should have. Minutes later, the room went still. Not in a dramatic movie way, but in that real-life, sickeningly awkward kind of still. Like when you drop a plate in the middle of a wedding toast. And then I heard it. Vivian's voice cutting through the ballroom like a razor. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I turned, and my heart plummeted. Vivian stood in the center of the room, a deep crimson stain across her white designer dress. Next to her, frozen in place, was Mia, eyes wide, hands trembling, an empty plastic cup dangling from her fingers. I I didn't mean to," Mia's voice cracked. Before I could even get to them, Vivian's hand flew. The sound of the slap was louder than the music. Mia stumbled back, clutching her cheek. The cup clattered to the marble floor. I rushed forward. "Vivian!" My voice shook, but not from fear, from rage. "You slapped her? She's a child!" "She's a brat," Vivian snapped, eyes still burning. "Just like her mother. Can't control her, can't act right, just like always." That was the moment. The moment I realized this wasn't about juice on a dress. This was about decades of resentment, jealousy, unspoken wars we never admitted we were fighting. And no one, not a single family member stepped in. Not Mom, who stood by the dessert table pretending to adjust her bracelet. Not Aunt Renee, who suddenly found her phone very interesting. Not even Dad, who gave me a helpless shrug like, "Don't make it worse." Make it worse? My daughter had just been assaulted in front of 60 people, and the worst part was not the slap, not even the words. It was the silence. I took Mia's hand and turned to leave, but Vivian wasn't finished. Maybe if you'd actually raised her right, she'd know not to ruin someone else's big day. The words hit like acid. My chest burned. But I didn't respond. Not then. Outside, Mia sobbed in the parking lot as I dabbed her cheek with a napkin. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my heels at Vivian's perfect white Porsche parked beside mine. I just stared ahead, feeling everything and nothing all at once. "Mom," Mia whispered through hiccups, "do I ruin everything?" I froze. And then I lied. "No, baby. You don't ruin anything. Ever." But that night, after she fell asleep in the back seat, curled up in her seatbelt like a broken doll, I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles cracked. It wasn't the slap that destroyed something inside me. It was that I let it happen. I let her hurt my daughter, the same way she used to hurt me. And I said nothing, not again. Callista didn't cry that night. Not in front of Mia, not in the car, not even in the shower with the water scalding enough to mask it. But she didn't sleep either. Instead, she sat curled on the edge of the bed, a cup of cold tea untouched in her hand, as the echo of the slap rang on repeat in her head. It wasn't the slap itself that haunted her. It was the silence that followed. The silence of 60 people watching, knowing, and doing nothing. Like it was acceptable. Like it had happened before. because it had. The next morning, Mia refused breakfast. Her cheek had only a faint mark now, but her eyes, they had lost something. A flicker, a spark. "Do I still have to go to school today?" she asked, voice small. "No," Callista said gently, kneeling to tie her daughter's shoelaces, even though Mia wasn't planning to leave the house. "You can stay with me. We'll make pancakes, the kind with chocolate chips in them." Mia hesitated. "You're not mad at me?" It was that question that cracked something open. "Never," Callista whispered. "You hear me? Never." Mia nodded, but she didn't smile. Later, while Mia colored silently at the kitchen table, Callista found herself digging through a plastic storage bin she hadn't opened in years. It was half filled with high school memorabilia, old concert tickets, a class ring, yearbooks, and a photograph. Two girls, maybe 14 and 15, Vivian in front, posed and polished even back then. Callista behind her, blurry, slightly out of frame. Forgotten. Typical. She remembered the day it was taken, Vivian's sweet 15. A party that had cost their parents thousands. Callista had been grounded that week, not for doing anything wrong, but because Vivian had blamed her for losing her custom tiara, which later turned up in her own gym locker. No apology. Just silence. And that silence, like all the others, became normal, expected, accepted. Back then, Callista had been the quiet child, the compliant one, the one who picked up the messes, took the blame, kept the peace. Her mother used to call her our calm one, but now, looking back, Callista realized what that really meant. The one who wouldn't fight back. Vivian had always been the performer, the golden girl, cheer captain, prom queen, scholarship winner, none of which were true. Vivian's cheer captain title had come after she spread rumors about the previous captain's eating disorder. Prom queen? Her boyfriend hacked the voting site. And that scholarship? It was meant for Callista. Callista had worked for months on that essay, stayed up nights perfecting it. Her English teacher even submitted a glowing recommendation behind her back. Then, suddenly, she wasn't even a finalist. It wasn't until a year later, college freshman year, when she stumbled across Vivian's laptop during a holiday visit and found the document. Her essay, her words, her title. Vivian had copied it, changed the name, and submitted it. And won. Callista never confronted her. Because what would she have said? Because by then, her parents had already spent the scholarship money on Vivian's out-of-state tuition deposit. They had said, "Be happy for her, Callie. Don't make this ugly." She had swallowed the betrayal and clapped anyway. But now, watching Mia trace colored flowers on paper like she was trying to create a better world, Callista realized something. Her silence hadn't protected the peace. It had just made space for more violence. She picked up her phone. Typed. Deleted. Typed again. Finally, she messaged someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Rachel, Callista. "Hey, I know this is out of the blue, but I need to ask you something about Vivian. Do you have a minute?" Rachel replied 2 minutes later. "Rachel, Callista. Of course. What's going on?" Rachel had been her best friend in high school before Vivian made things complicated. There had been drama over a boy, then false rumors that Callista had cheated on a test, and just like that, their friendship was over. But Callista had always wondered, had Rachel known the truth? They met at a quiet cafe 2 days later. Rachel had aged gracefully, her energy calmer than Callista remembered. After a brief hug, they sat in silence for a moment. "You look good," Rachel offered. Callista nodded. "So do you." Then, without warning, she said, "Did you know Vivian stole my scholarship essay?" Rachel exhaled like she'd been waiting years for someone to ask her that question. "Yes," she said. "I knew. I wanted to tell you. I even had a draft email, but then she threatened to release fake screenshots of me cheating on the SAT. I panicked. I'm sorry, Callie." Callista blinked. She hadn't expected confirmation. Not this easily, not this soon. "She ruined so many people," Rachel continued. Do you know she got a girl fired last year from her job at Vivian's PR firm just because she wore the same dress as her to a holiday party? I mean, fired. Callista's hand curled around her coffee cup. Do you still talk to her? She asked. Rachel scoffed. After that, no, she's toxic. I try to stay out of her orbit. Good. Why now? Rachel asked. Callista looked out the window. Because this time, it wasn't just me. The problem with Vivian was never that she lied. It was that she did it so beautifully, so believably, that even the people who should have known better, family, friends, sometimes even Callista herself, chose to believe her version of things. But the slap changed that. And what Rachel had confirmed cracked something open. Once Callista allowed herself to consider that Vivian's cruelty hadn't been isolated or accidental, the memories surged back. Not like a flood, but like a slow, rising tide. Quiet, inevitable. On Wednesday morning, Callista walked Mia into therapy for the first time. The counselor, a calm woman named Jen, knelt to Mia's level and asked if she liked drawing. Mia nodded, but didn't say a word. You can stay in the lobby, Jen said gently, or go grab a coffee nearby. We'll just talk. Callista hesitated. Letting someone else in, even a licensed professional, felt like stepping off a ledge, but she nodded and stepped outside. She didn't get coffee. Instead, she sat in her car, parked a block away, hands wrapped tight around the steering wheel like it might keep her from unraveling. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of everything not said. Vivian hadn't just bruised her daughter's cheek. She'd reopened 100 wounds Callista had trained herself not to feel. Later that afternoon, after Mia had gone to bed, Callista opened her laptop. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Maybe validation. Maybe proof she wasn't overreacting. She typed toxic sibling relationships into the search bar. A dozen articles appeared, followed by forums, Reddit threads, even TED Talks. Stories echoed her own. Families that protected abusers, siblings who stole, lied, manipulated, then gaslit anyone who tried to speak up. One story, posted by a woman under a pseudonym, hit especially hard. The user described how her sister had spread rumors that led to her losing a job, then turned the family against her. The comments were flooded with messages of support, and one comment stood out. People like that don't just lie. They edit reality so convincingly that you start to question your own memories. Callista stared at that sentence for a long time. She knew exactly what that felt like. The next day, she called her cousin Jade. They hadn't spoken in nearly a year, not since the last Thanksgiving when Vivian accused Jade of stealing her spotlight by announcing her engagement. Callista, Jade answered, surprised. Wow, it's been, well, a while. I need to ask you something, Callista said, skipping the small talk. It's about Vivian. Jade sighed so deeply that it felt like she'd been waiting for someone to ask. What did she do now? She slapped Mia, Callista said. At the engagement party, no one said a word. There was a pause. Then Jade said, That tracks. What do you mean? I mean, she slapped me once too. Christmas Eve 2 years ago, when I told her I wasn't going to be one of her bridesmaids. She said I was selfish, that I didn't support her, and when I told her to back off, she slapped me. Callista's chest tightened. Why didn't you say anything? She asked, barely breathing. Because Mom told me to drop it. Said, don't make it into something. Vivian's always dramatic. You know how she gets. And I did. I dropped it. Like we always do. Callista closed her eyes. This wasn't about one bad day. This was a pattern, a legacy. And if no one had ever stopped her before, maybe it was because no one had ever tried. Callista started pulling threads. She revisited old messages, scrolled through years of family group chats, emails, even photo captions. The deeper she looked, the clearer the picture became. Vivian had built her image on the bones of everyone else. There was the year she convinced their parents that Callista was in credit card debt, when really, Vivian had stolen Callista's card during winter break. There was the time she helped Callista with a job application, only for Callista to later discover that the application was never submitted. Vivian had told the hiring manager she was withdrawing on Callista's behalf. Subtle sabotage, always with a smile. One night, Callista pulled out a dusty external hard drive from her closet, the one she'd used back in college to save old files. Inside, she found a folder marked Essays Final. She opened it. Inside were drafts of her original scholarship essay, the one Vivian had stolen. She found the metadata on one document that showed her name and the original creation date. Proof. She didn't know what she was going to do with it yet. But now she knew. If she ever needed to show people the truth, she could. The real twist came 2 days later, when Callista received an email from a blocked sender. Subject: You're making a mistake. There was no greeting, just one sentence. I'd be very careful if I were you. You know how easily things can be twisted. No name. But she didn't need one. Vivian knew. Silence used to be Callista's armor. It was the shield she wore at dinner tables, the way she swallowed her words to keep the peace. It was how she survived years under the weight of a sister who weaponized charm and cruelty in equal measure. But now it was her weapon. She wasn't planning a tantrum. She wasn't marching through the family group chat demanding apologies. She wasn't writing open letters or calling out Vivian in public. She was doing something better. She was listening. She was watching. And she was building something Vivian had never expected. Leverage. Callista sat alone in her living room that Thursday evening, her laptop glowing against the dimness of the space. The TV was off. Mia was asleep upstairs. Outside, the wind rustled through late autumn leaves like a whisper. The podcast idea had started as a joke, a passing thought during a session with Jen, Mia's therapist. You always say your story doesn't matter, Jen had said, but I wonder who told you that. Callista had laughed then, a dry, hollow sound. But the next morning, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at a blank Google Doc. And she typed, Episode 1. When they call it love, but it looks like control. By Sunday, she'd recorded 4 episodes. Just audio. Her voice raw, unscripted, and anonymous. She told stories, not with names, but with truths. About a girl whose sister used to lock her in closets for fun. About a scholarship that went missing. About how sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who teach you to hate yourself in the quietest, most permanent ways. The podcast wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. She released the first 2 episodes on a Tuesday night. By Thursday, she had 3,000 plays. By Saturday, over 9,000. And buried in the comments were other women, strangers, but not unfamiliar. One wrote, You're not alone, she sounds like my sister. Another simply said, I didn't know it was okay to be angry. Callista didn't respond to them, but she read every single one. And somewhere inside her, something that had been numb for years began to stir. The real shift came the following week. A direct message slid into her inbox. Private. Simple. I work with Vivian. I think you're talking about her. I need to tell you something. Callista stared at the message for a long time. It was unsigned, anonymous. But the profile photo, just a nondescript flower icon, felt deliberate. She responded, I'm listening. What came next hit harder than she was prepared for. The woman, who eventually signed off as M, explained that she had been a junior associate at Vivian's PR firm. That Vivian had regularly bullied, humiliated, and even blackmailed interns into doing unethical favors, editing public records, planting rumors about clients, erasing evidence. And that recently, Vivian had started pressuring staff to scrub anything online related to a name, Callista Wren. Her. Vivian was trying to erase her. You need to protect yourself, M wrote. How? Callista typed back. A few moments passed. Tell your story louder than she can lie. The next day, Callista called Jade. Are you still in touch with anyone who worked with Vivienne? She asked. I know one of her exes, Jade said. He used to say she scared him, like actually scared. Want me to reach out? Callista hesitated. Then, yes, please. 2 days later, a man named Owen called. His voice was quiet, unsure. "I dated Vivian 3 years ago," he said. "She ruined my life." He explained how Vivian had found out about his therapy sessions and threatened to leak private notes she had stolen from his phone. How she'd told his boss he was emotionally unstable and got him fired after they broke up. "She's dangerous," Owen said. Callista felt her pulse thudding in her ears. "But if you're going after her," he added, "you're not alone. Not anymore." That night, Callista went to bed with a journal beside her. She listed every name, every story, every lie Vivian had told, and every person she'd hurt. Not to publish. Not yet. Just to remember. Because for the first time, she saw her sister clearly, not as the center of every room, but as a fragile illusion maintained through silence and fear. And illusions don't survive exposure. The morning of Vivian's wedding rehearsal, Callista stood in the kitchen, pouring herself a cup of coffee that she wouldn't finish. Her hands were steady. Her mind was not. Something about the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the tapping of Mia's pencil against her cereal bowl, the way sunlight filtered through the blinds. It all felt too calm. Like the air before a storm. She hadn't planned for this. Not the way people thought of revenge. No calculated sabotage, no anonymous leaks to tabloids. But the truth, when let loose, doesn't always whisper. Sometimes it explodes. And it had started. 2 days before, an anonymous listener from the podcast had uploaded a clip to TikTok. Callista's voice, raw and steady, telling the story of how a beloved public figure slapped a child in front of dozens of witnesses and no one intervened. They didn't name Vivian. They didn't have to. The video went viral in less than 24 hours. Comments flooded in. "This sounds familiar. Is she talking about that PR girl who's all over Instagram? If this is who I think it is, I used to work for her. She's terrifying." Then came the duets, the stitched videos, and finally, the receipts. Owen, Vivian's ex, had reached out again. "I didn't want to go public," he said on the phone, his voice shaking. "But I sent your podcast to a friend who works in media. She's asking for an interview. They want to expose her. Properly." Callista's first instinct was to say no. This wasn't about humiliating Vivian. But then Mia came downstairs with her notebook, the one where she'd drawn the picture of a mother shielding her daughter from a faceless shadow. Callista exhaled. "Tell her I'll talk, off record, for now." The interview never aired. It didn't need to. 3 other former employees came forward on a Reddit thread. Then, someone leaked a company email where Vivian had used racial slurs. Another posted screenshots of her sending a threatening message to an intern. "Watch yourself. I can ruin you without lifting a finger." It was wildfire. By the time the rehearsal dinner rolled around, Vivian was a trending name. Not for her wedding, but for a PR scandal so toxic that brands started pulling contracts. And yet, she didn't cancel the event. She didn't even flinch publicly. Vivian showed up at the rehearsal in white chiffon, and a smile so tight it could have cracked glass. Callista hadn't planned to attend. But then Jade called. "She's spinning it," Jade said, "telling people she's the victim of a smear campaign, that an unstable ex-friend is behind all of it." Of course she was. Callista sat on her bed for a full 10 minutes before standing up, walking to her closet, and pulling out the same navy dress she wore the night Vivian slapped her daughter. There was poetry in it. The venue was smaller than the engagement party. Less glamour, less sparkle. The air was different too, stiff with something unspoken. Even the champagne felt flat. When Callista walked in, the room didn't go silent. It deflated. Eyes darted. Conversations shifted. Vivian turned slowly from across the room. Her smile flickered for just a moment, but she didn't waver. "Callista," she said smoothly, "how brave of you to come." Callista tilted her head. "I figured someone ought to be honest in a room full of liars." Vivian's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained sweet. "You really should be careful. Slander's a serious thing." "Good thing I haven't named anyone," Callista replied. But if the shoe fits, a hush rippled through the crowd. Vivian leaned in slightly, voice low. You think you've won something, don't you? No, Callista said. I haven't won anything, but I'm not scared anymore. That's enough. The rehearsal dragged. Vivian gave speeches, posed for photos, laughed a little too loud. But underneath, her hands shook. Callista saw it when she held her wine glass, just the faintest tremble. And then, the final unraveling came. A video, projected unintentionally, or perhaps very intentionally, onto the event hall's main screen. Someone had plugged in the wrong device. Or the right one. Because instead of Vivian's engagement slideshow, the room was suddenly filled with the audio from a podcast episode. Callista's voice. The first time she pushed me down the stairs, I was 12. My mother said I must have slipped, but she was there. She saw. She lied for her. The audio echoed. Gasps followed. The screen flickered. Photos of Vivian, behind the scenes, arms crossed, frowning at assistants, yelling off camera, leaked footage, a full 2 minutes before someone pulled the plug. And by then, it was too late. Vivian didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stood there, frozen. Because what do you do when the image you built so carefully, so meticulously, shatters in front of the people who worshipped it? She turned to Callista. You did this. No, Callista said, voice calm. You did. She walked out of that venue into the crisp night air, with her heels in her hand and no need to look back. The press picked it up within the hour. The wedding was postponed, then canceled, by the groom. The house was smaller than Callista expected. One story, wood-framed, tucked into the curve of a sleepy cul-de-sac just outside of Asheville. The paint had faded, the shutters needed fixing, and the backyard was more wild than landscaped. But when she stood on the front porch with the keys in her hand and Mia's tiny backpack looped over her shoulder, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a breath she hadn't taken in years. The move hadn't been loud. There were no dramatic goodbye texts, no speeches, no confrontation. She hadn't even told her parents. The day after the canceled wedding, Callista had packed up their apartment, called the realtor, and signed the lease on a house 2 states away. She didn't owe anyone an explanation. Vivian's scandal had made it to national gossip pages. Brand partnerships dropped, corporate contracts canceled, podcast interviews flooded in. But Callista gave none. She didn't want the spotlight. She wanted peace. And you can't find peace in the middle of a battlefield. Is this really our house? Mia asked as she stepped inside, her voice reverent like she was entering a cathedral. It is, Callista said, kneeling beside her. No yelling, no secrets, just us. Mia looked around, then smiled, small but real. Can we paint my room purple? We can paint it the moon if you want, Callista said. Mia beamed. Okay, but I think I just want purple. Callista started working part-time at the local bookstore, a dusty little corner of the town square run by a couple who'd retired from teaching. They didn't ask about her past. They didn't recognize her voice. It was perfect. During her off hours, she began offering free writing workshops at the community center, under a new name, just Miss C. Children came with nervous hands and wild imaginations, and slowly she remembered why she loved stories. Because stories could be rewritten, even your own. One Saturday afternoon, while cleaning out the last of the moving boxes, Callista found the journal where she'd written the names. The ones Vivian had hurt. The ones who had hurt alongside her. She didn't need it anymore, but she couldn't bring herself to throw it away. Instead, she slipped it between the pages of a donated copy of Jane Eyre, tucked onto the pay-what-you-can shelf at the bookstore. It was a strange kind of release, but it felt right. Let someone else find the stories when they need them. Mia was thriving. She made friends faster than Callista expected. Her new school had an art program, and every Friday she came home with paint under her fingernails and stars in her eyes. One night, Callista found her sitting cross-legged in bed, drawing. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing at the tall figure Mia had sketched beside a child in a purple dress. "That's you," Mia said without looking up. "You're holding all the scary stuff away." Callista sat beside her, brushing a hand over Mia's hair. "Sweetheart," she said, voice quiet, "I didn't always get it right." "I know," Mia said, "but you didn't stop. That's what counts." It wasn't until winter that the letter came. No envelope, no return address. Just a single folded sheet slipped through the bookstore's mail slot, postmarked from their old city. Callista recognized the handwriting instantly. "Callie, you win. I hope it was worth it. Just remember, people forget scandals. They don't forget traitors." She stared at it for a long time. Then she folded it back up, walked to the wood-burning stove behind the shop, and watched it turn to ash. The podcast was still live, but she didn't add to it. She didn't need to. The final episode had been recorded weeks before the move. No names, no accusations. Just a message. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Not from the fight, but from the need to win it. She'd said it once. She wouldn't say it again. Months passed. Then, one evening, while sweeping the bookstore's back room, she found a note left under the cash register. It was from a teenage girl who'd attended her workshop. "You make me believe people like me can grow up and not be broken." Callista folded the note into her wallet and didn't tell anyone. But that night, she slept without waking. For the first time in years, there was no curtain call, no viral post, no final confrontation. Only silence, but not the kind that haunts, the kind that heals. It was nearly spring when Callista was invited to speak at the local high school's creative writing night. She almost declined. Public speaking wasn't her strength, and she wasn't sure what she'd say that hadn't already been whispered into a mic and shared with a sea of strangers online. But when Mia asked if she could come and see her mom on stage, she couldn't say no. The auditorium was modest. Plastic chairs, a slightly squeaky mic, mismatched curtains. Callista sat backstage, her fingers laced in her lap, breathing slow and steady. She wasn't nervous. She was waiting to feel something. She still wore scars no one could see, but they no longer bled when she touched them. And maybe that was enough. When her name was called, she walked to the podium and looked out. Not at a crowd, but at a collection of individuals. Young faces, teachers, a few parents. Mia in the front row, legs swinging, eyes shining. Callista smiled. Then she began. "I used to think telling your story meant reliving the pain, that speaking it out loud would make it real, and worse, make it permanent. But I've learned something. Silence doesn't protect the truth. It buries it. And what stays buried grows roots in the dark. I was hurt, for a long time, by people I loved, by people who were supposed to love me back. But here's the thing no one tells you. You don't need them to admit what they did for you to heal from it. You don't need revenge to rebuild. You don't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes you just need to live well enough that their voice no longer drowns out your own. Peace isn't quiet. It's powerful." The applause wasn't thunderous. It wasn't even loud, but it was steady, earnest, real. And when Callista stepped down from the stage, Mia threw her arms around her waist and whispered, "You sounded like a hero." She hugged her back. "You made me one." Months passed. The podcast remained online, untouched, but still listened to, shared in quiet corners of the internet by people who needed it. She still worked at the bookstore, still ran writing workshops, still let herself breathe. And one afternoon, she received a letter. No name, no return address. Inside, a single sentence. "Because of your voice, I finally left." Callista pressed the letter to her chest. Sometimes the loudest echoes come from silence. She began to write again, not anonymously, not as a ghost, but as herself. Essays, fiction, maybe someday a book. She didn't write to expose. She wrote to remind that surviving is not the end, living is. Vivian was no longer a presence. The internet moved on, as it always does. Her sister slipped into obscurity. Not ruined, just irrelevant. And that, Callista thought, was the most poetic justice of all. On the anniversary of their move, Mia asked if they could start a new tradition, painting rocks and leaving them in the park with messages for strangers. Callista smiled. What kind of messages? Things people might need to hear, Mia said. Like, you matter. Or, it's not your fault. Or, she paused. Or maybe, it's okay to walk away. Callista blinked back a sting of tears. Yeah, she said softly. That's a good one. The two of them walked into the park that afternoon, palms stained with paint, pockets heavy with small truths written in bold colors. They left them under benches, in the crooks of trees, beside playgrounds. Each stone a seed, each word a thread. Because sometimes what heals you doesn't just stay with you, it multiplies. If any part of this feels like your story too, maybe just leave a stone behind. The seasons changed quietly in their new town. By the second spring, the dogwood trees lining Callista's street had bloomed into blush white clouds, their petals falling like snow onto cracked sidewalks and porch steps. Life was no longer a battle to win or a wound to hide. It was, finally, something to live. Callista often thought about the way silence used to suffocate her, how it pressed into her chest like a weight, how it taught her that staying quiet was the only way to survive. But now, in this small, ordinary life, silence had become something else entirely. A choice, a sanctuary, a kind of peace that didn't demand explanation. It had been over a year since she recorded the last podcast. She hadn't taken it down. She didn't have to. It had become something self-sustaining, shared in whispers, in links passed from one survivor to another. People still emailed. Sometimes they wrote long stories, sometimes just a single sentence. I finally left. She reminds me of my brother. I never told anyone before this. And once, from a woman who said her sister never laid a hand on her, but still left bruises she couldn't name. I always thought I was being dramatic. Your voice made me realize I wasn't being dramatic. I was being dismissed. Callista never responded. She didn't need to. The story had outgrown her. Mia turned 11 that summer. They didn't throw a party. Mia didn't want one. Instead, they went hiking, just the two of them, and ate peanut butter sandwiches by a waterfall where Mia tossed a rock into the water and whispered, "For the girl I used to be." Callista didn't ask her to explain. Some things didn't need explanation. They needed witnessing. That fall, Callista's first essay was published in a national magazine. It wasn't about Vivian, not directly. It was about how some people get used to dimming their light to fit into rooms that never love them back. It was about what happens when they stop. The response was quiet but steady. Readers reached out. Former students sent her screenshots. Her editor called it visceral without being angry. Callista smiled when she read that. She wasn't angry anymore. She was just done pretending she wasn't ever hurt. One rainy October morning, she opened her email and saw a name she hadn't thought about in months. Vivian. The subject line read, "No more lies." Her chest didn't tighten. Her breath didn't catch. She just clicked. The email was short. Callie. You'll be glad to know I'm moving. I'm leaving the city, going to try something quieter. I heard about your article. I read it. You didn't have to say my name. I knew who it was about. I'm sorry. Not for everything, maybe. But for some. I guess that's what I can give you. What's left of me? Viv Callista stared at it for a long while. Then she closed the tab. No reply. There was nothing left to say. Because forgiveness wasn't always loud either. Sometimes it was just not needing revenge anymore. Sometimes it was letting someone go, even if they still wanted to be seen. That winter, Mia got invited to speak at a local youth summit. She gave a short talk about bravery in small ways, about how not every hero wore capes. Some packed lunches, read bedtime stories, and stayed even when it was hard. When she got off the stage, she ran straight to Callista. Did I sound okay? Callista knelt to meet her eye. You sounded like someone who knows the truth of things, she said. That's more than okay. Callista didn't become famous. She didn't build a platform. She never wrote a memoir. But she became the woman her past self had once needed. And that was everything. On the last page of her new journal, Callista wrote, I didn't get justice, but I found peace. And peace, when you've lived without it long enough, feels like power. Then she closed the book and began another. If you made it this far, maybe you understand something that can't always be said out loud. If this story echoes with yours, even just a little, maybe that means you're not alone. What I've learned through all of this is that healing doesn't come from revenge. It comes from reclaiming your own voice, your peace, your story. No one gets to define your worth but you. If you've ever felt trapped by silence or loyalty to someone who keeps hurting you, please hear this. You are not alone, and walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved to find yourself? If this story touched something deep in you, let me know where you're watching from, or just leave a in the comments so I know you're out there. And if you didn't like it, I'd love to hear why. Let's talk about it. And hey, if you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more real, raw stories.